Ladies and gentlemen, today I stand before you to share a story, not just of a man but of a mindset. A mindset built on resilience, forged in hardship, and powered by unbreakable belief. This is the courage code of Joe Ranga. Joe Ranga was not born into comfort. He was born into challenge. The world did not hand him opportunities, it handed him obstacles. But here is the difference: while others saw walls, Joe saw lessons. While others saw failure, Joe saw feedback. Courage is not the absence of fear. Courage is action despite fear. Joe Ranga understood this deeply. Every setback he faced became a stepping stone. Every rejection became redirection. Every hardship became preparation. When doors closed, he knocked harder. When people doubted him, he worked quieter. When storms came, he stood firmer. The courage code of Joe Ranga is simple yet powerful. Believe when no one else does. Work when no one is watching. Stand when everyone else sits. And rise every time you fall. He did not measure success by applause. He measured it by progress. He did not compete with others. He competed with yesterday's version of himself. There were nights of doubt. There were moments of exhaustion. There were times when quitting seemed easier than continuing. But Joe had a code, a personal promise never to surrender his dreams to temporary pain. And that is what separates dreamers from achievers. Not talent, not luck, not background, but courage. Courage to start. Courage to continue. Courage to finish. Joe Ranga teaches us that greatness is not built in comfort zones. It is built in storms. It is built when you choose discipline over distraction, persistence over pressure, and faith over fear. So today I ask you, what is your courage code? What promise have you made to yourself? And are you living by it? Because inside every one of us is the power to rise. Inside every setback is a hidden lesson. And inside every struggle is the seed of strength. The courage code of Joe Ranga is not just his story. It can be yours. Stand tall. Stay committed. And never break your code. Courage is often misunderstood. Many people believe that brave individuals are those who feel no fear. But the truth is very different. Courage is not the absence of fear. It is the decision to move forward even when fear is present. Fear is a natural human emotion. It protects us. It warns us. It prepares us. When Joe Ranga stood at the edge of uncertainty, he felt fear just like anyone else. He felt the fear of failure, the fear of rejection, the fear of being judged, and the fear of not being good enough. But what made him different was not that he was fearless. It was that he refused to let fear control his decisions. Every time he faced a new challenge, fear whispered doubts in his mind. What if you fail? What if people laugh? What if this doesn't work? But courage answered louder. What if you succeed? What if this changes your life? What if this is your breakthrough? Acting despite fear requires inner strength. It means stepping onto the stage even when your hands are shaking. It means submitting the application even when you doubt yourself. It means starting the business even when the outcome is uncertain. It means speaking up when silence feels safer. Joe Ranga understood that fear is temporary, but regret can last a lifetime. He realized that avoiding fear does not eliminate it, it only delays growth. Every time he confronted his fears, he became stronger. Every uncomfortable step expanded his confidence. Every risk he took built resilience. Courage is built like a muscle. The more you use it, the stronger it becomes. The first step may feel overwhelming. The second step may still feel uncomfortable. But over time, what once felt impossible becomes manageable. What once seemed terrifying becomes routine. Acting despite fear also means accepting vulnerability. It means allowing yourself to be imperfect. It means understanding that failure is not a reflection of your worth, it is part of the learning process. Joe did not wait until he felt ready. He moved forward while still uncertain. He acted before he felt confident. And through action, confidence followed. Fear tries to keep us in safe zones. Courage pushes us beyond them. Fear focuses on risks. Courage focuses on possibilities. Fear asks, what if I lose? Courage asks, what if I grow? There were moments when Joe's path was unclear. Moments when he stood alone in his decisions. Moments when quitting would have been easier than continuing. But instead of surrendering to fear, he acknowledged it and moved anyway. That is the true definition of bravery. Courage is not loud. It is often quiet. It is the small decision made daily to keep going. It is waking up early to try again. It is choosing effort over excuses. It is standing back up after being knocked down. When you act despite fear, you send a powerful message to yourself. I am stronger than my doubts. I am capable of growth. I will not let fear decide my future. And with each courageous action, fear loses its power. Not because it disappears, but because you prove to yourself that it cannot stop you. Obstacles are often seen as barriers, heavy, frustrating blocks that stand between us and our goals. Most people, when confronted with repeated difficulties, begin to believe those obstacles are signs to stop. But in the courage code of Joe Ranga, obstacles were never stop signs. They were classrooms. Every challenge Joe faced carried a lesson hidden within it. When opportunities slipped away, he didn't see proof of inadequacy. He saw feedback. When plans failed, he didn't label himself a failure. He analyzed the process, adjusted his strategy, and tried again with greater awareness. Obstacles test patience. They test belief. They test commitment. But more importantly, they teach resilience, creativity, and adaptability. Joe understood that comfort does not build strength. Resistance does. Just as muscles grow under pressure, character grows under challenge. When financial struggles appeared, he learned resourcefulness. When people doubted him, he learned self-belief. When progress slowed, he learned discipline. Each obstacle forced him to develop a new skill or mindset he would not have gained in easy conditions. Limitations exist when we decide to stop. Lessons exist when we decide to learn. Many people allow one setback to define their identity. One rejection becomes, "I'm not good enough." One mistake becomes, "I can't do this." But Joe separated events from identity. A failed attempt did not mean he was incapable. It meant the method needed improvement. A closed door did not mean the journey was over. It meant another path needed exploration. Obstacles also reveal our weaknesses, and that is a gift. Without challenges, blind spots remain hidden. Pressure exposes them. Instead of feeling discouraged by his shortcomings, Joe studied them. He turned weaknesses into projects for growth. Every flaw became an opportunity for development. There were times when the obstacles seemed endless, when progress felt slow and results invisible. In those moments, the temptation to quit was strong. But Joe reminded himself that the presence of difficulty does not mean the absence of possibility. Sometimes the hardest roads lead to the strongest foundations. Obstacles also strengthen emotional endurance. They teach patience in a world obsessed with speed. They teach humility when pride wants quick recognition. They teach perseverance when immediate rewards are absent. Instead of asking, "Why is this happening to me?" Joe asked, "What is this teaching me?" That shift in perspective changed everything. The same situation that could break someone became a breakthrough moment for him. Challenges force innovation. When the usual path is blocked, creativity awakens. Joe learned to think differently, approach problems strategically, and remain flexible. Each obstacle sharpened his thinking and strengthened his resolve. Most importantly, obstacles build confidence. Not the loud, fragile kind, but the quiet, earned kind. The confidence that comes from knowing you have survived difficulty before. The confidence that says, "If I overcame that, I can overcome this." Limitations are walls we accept. Lessons are bridges we build. Every obstacle Joe Ranga faced added another layer to his resilience. Every struggle strengthened his mental endurance. Every delay refined his patience. What once looked like barriers became stepping stones. What once seemed like setbacks became setups for growth. The difference was never the obstacle itself. It was the mindset toward it. Rejection is one of the most painful experiences a person can face. It feels personal. It feels final. It feels like a door slamming shut right in front of your dreams. But in the courage code of Joe Ranga, rejection was never an ending, it was a turning point. When Joe faced rejection, he felt the sting like anyone else. The silence after an application. The unanswered message. The opportunity given to someone else. The criticism that questioned his ability. Each moment carried disappointment. Each no tested his belief. But instead of interpreting rejection as proof of inadequacy, he chose to see it as direction. Rejection is often protection in disguise. Sometimes we chase opportunities that are not aligned with our true path. Sometimes we knock on doors that are not meant to open. And sometimes a no today prevents a greater regret tomorrow. Joe understood that every rejection carried information. It revealed what needed improvement. It revealed where growth was required. It revealed whether the opportunity truly matched his long-term vision. Instead of reacting emotionally, he responded strategically. When one opportunity slipped away, he didn't collapse, he recalibrated. Rejection also builds emotional strength. It forces you to separate your worth from the outcome. A rejected proposal does not mean you lack value. A failed attempt does not define your identity. It simply means the timing, the fit, or the approach was not right. Joe trained himself to ask better questions. What can I learn from this? How can I improve? Where should I redirect my energy? Each rejection sharpened his focus. It refined his skills. It strengthened his patience. It pushed him to upgrade himself rather than downgrade his dreams. Many people stop after the first rejection. Some stop after the second. Very few continue after repeated setbacks. But Joe knew that persistence outlasts resistance. The more rejections he survived, the more fearless he became. The word no lost its power over him. Rejection also reveals commitment. If one refusal makes you quit, the goal may not have been strong enough. But if rejection fuels your determination, then your purpose is deeper than temporary disappointment. There were moments when doors closed unexpectedly. Moments when he thought, this was the one. But later he realized those closed doors guided him toward better paths. Paths he would never have discovered otherwise. What felt like loss became alignment. Redirection requires awareness. When something doesn't work, it's not a signal to surrender. It's a signal to adjust. Joe learned to pivot without losing passion. He changed strategies without changing his vision. He adapted his methods without abandoning his mission. Rejection refines resilience. It teaches humility. It builds emotional endurance. It strengthens belief from within rather than depending on external validation. And over time, Joe realized something powerful. The same rejections that once felt painful were necessary steps toward greater opportunities. Each no cleared the path for a better yes. Rejection does not mean you are not good enough. It may mean you are being prepared for something greater. Talent is powerful. It creates early advantages. It attracts attention. It opens doors. But talent alone is not enough to sustain long-term success. In the Courage Code of Joe Ranga, one principle stood firm. Consistency will always outlast raw ability when ability lacks discipline. Joe understood something many people overlook. Talent gives you a head start, but consistency wins the race. There are countless gifted individuals who begin strong but fade over time. Why? Because talent without discipline becomes comfortable. It relies on natural ability instead of effort. It depends on bursts of motivation instead of steady commitment. Consistency, on the other hand, does not rely on mood. It does not depend on applause. It does not wait for perfect conditions. It shows up daily, especially when enthusiasm fades. Joe was not always the most naturally gifted person in the room, but he was often the most persistent. When others stopped practicing, he continued refining. When others became distracted, he stayed focused. When others waited for motivation, he relied on routine. Consistency is built in small, repeated actions. Waking up on time. Practicing even when tired. Studying even when bored. Improving 1% every day. These actions may seem insignificant in the moment, but over time they compound into extraordinary results. Talent shines quickly. Consistency shines permanently. There were days when Joe did not feel inspired. Days when progress felt invisible. Days when effort seemed unrewarded. But he kept going. Not because it was exciting, but because it was necessary. He understood that greatness is not created in moments of intensity, but in seasons of persistence. Consistency builds trust. Trust in yourself. Every time Joe followed through on his commitments, his self-belief strengthened. He proved to himself that he could rely on his own discipline. That inner trust became more valuable than natural ability. Talent may create opportunity, but consistency sustains growth. Another truth Joe embraced was that motivation is temporary, but habits are reliable. If you depend on feeling inspired, you will act inconsistently. But if you build systems and routines, you act regardless of how you feel. Consistency also builds resilience. Repeated effort trains the mind to endure difficulty. The more you show up, the less intimidating challenges become. Progress becomes predictable, not accidental. When talented individuals encounter resistance, some withdraw because they are not used to struggle. But someone who has built consistency is comfortable with effort. They expect challenges. They are prepared for resistance. Joe focused less on dramatic breakthroughs and more on daily discipline. He believed that small improvements done repeatedly are more powerful than occasional bursts of brilliance. He valued steady growth over sudden success. Over time, something remarkable happens. The consistent individual begins to outperform the talented but inconsistent one. The gap widens. Skill sharpens. Confidence deepens. Momentum builds. Consistency creates mastery. It transforms potential into performance. It turns intention into achievement. While talent may impress in the beginning, consistency determines who remains standing in the end. In a world driven by likes, recognition, and public validation, it is easy to believe that success is measured by applause. The louder the praise, the greater the achievement seems. But in the Courage Code of Joe Ranga, success was never defined by noise, it was defined by growth. Applause is temporary. Progress is permanent. Joe understood that external validation is unpredictable. Some days the crowd cheers. Other days it criticizes. And sometimes it remains silent. If he had measured his success by the reactions of others, his motivation would have constantly fluctuated. Instead, he focused on internal progress, the quiet improvements no one else could see. Progress is waking up stronger than yesterday. Progress is learning from mistakes instead of repeating them. Progress is moving one step closer to your goal, even if no one notices. Joe trained himself to measure growth in private victories, the discipline he maintained, the skills he sharpened, the habits he strengthened. He understood that true development happens behind the scenes. The world only sees the highlight. It rarely sees the hard work that built it. Applause can be addictive. Feels good. It boosts confidence. But it can also become dangerous. When you rely on praise to feel successful, you begin to perform for approval rather than purpose. Your direction shifts from growth to recognition. Joe chose a different path. He asked himself daily, am I better than I was yesterday? Have I learned something new? Have I improved even slightly? If the answer was yes, that was success. There were times when his efforts went unnoticed. Times when his progress was slow. Times when recognition was absent. But instead of feeling discouraged, he remained committed to improvement. He believed that consistency and growth would eventually create visible results. Progress builds sustainable confidence. Unlike applause, which depends on others, progress depends on effort. When you see yourself improving, your belief becomes rooted in reality, not in opinion. Another truth Joe embraced was that applause can disappear as quickly as it appears. Trends change. Audiences shift. Public opinion evolves. But skills developed through steady progress remain valuable. Progress also teaches patience. Big achievements are often the result of small, repeated improvements over time. Joe did not rush the process. He respected it. He understood that slow growth is still growth. By focusing on progress, he removed comparison from his journey. Applause often creates unhealthy competition. Who is louder, faster, or more visible? But progress is personal. It is about your evolution, not someone else's spotlight. When success is measured by applause, failure feels public and painful. But when success is measured by progress, setbacks become part of the process. Even mistakes contribute to growth. Joe learned to celebrate small wins, completing a task, overcoming hesitation, improving a skill. These quiet victories strengthened his mindset and kept him moving forward. Over time, progress naturally attracted recognition. But by then, applause was no longer the goal, it was simply a byproduct of dedication. Success rooted in progress creates lasting impact. It builds depth, not just display. It builds character, not just reputation. It builds substance, not just sound. Comparison is one of the fastest ways to lose focus, confidence, and clarity. In a world where everyone's achievements are constantly displayed, it is easy to measure your journey against someone else's timeline. But in the Courage Code of Joe Ranga, competition was never external, it was internal. Joe understood a powerful truth. The only person he needed to outperform was yesterday's version of himself. When you compete with others, your standards constantly shift. There will always be someone faster, smarter, wealthier, or more experienced. If your motivation depends on being ahead of others, you will either feel superior or inadequate, both of which are unstable foundations for growth. But when you compete with your past self, growth becomes personal and measurable. The focus shifts from comparison to improvement. Joe asked himself simple but powerful questions. Am I more disciplined than I was last month? Am I more skilled than I was last year? Have I grown stronger through my struggles? This mindset eliminated envy. Instead of resenting someone else's success, he used it as inspiration. Instead of feeling threatened by progress around him, he focused on sharpening his own abilities. External competition creates pressure. Internal competition creates progress. When Joe looked back at his earlier challenges, mistakes, and doubts, he saw evidence of growth. The fears that once paralyzed him no longer had the same power. The tasks that once seemed impossible became manageable. That realization built quiet confidence. Competing with your past self also encourages patience. Everyone's journey is unique. Different starting points, different resources, different timing. Comparing chapters from different stories only leads to frustration. But measuring your own chapters allows you to see steady development. Joe treated every day as a chance to improve, even by a small margin. One extra hour of effort. One new skill practiced. one weakness addressed. Small improvements accumulated over time created significant transformation. This mindset also removes unnecessary distractions. When your goal is to surpass others, you may waste energy trying to match their pace or mimic their path. But when your goal is self-improvement, your energy stays directed toward your own growth. There were moments when Joe felt tempted to compare. When he saw others advancing quickly, recognition arriving sooner, opportunities appearing easier. But instead of allowing comparison to discourage him, he reminded himself that growth is not a race. It is a process. Competing with your past self builds self-awareness. It forces you to evaluate honestly. Where did you struggle before? What habits held you back? What strengths have you developed? This reflection strengthens discipline and direction. It also creates sustainable motivation. When progress is personal, it is always within your control. You cannot control someone else's speed, talent, or opportunities. But you can control your effort, your learning, and your consistency. Over time, Joe realized something powerful. The only true victory is personal evolution. Becoming stronger than your former self. Becoming wiser than your past mistakes. Becoming more resilient than your previous limitations. And as he continued this internal competition, the gap between who he was and who he was becoming grew wider. Not because he defeated others, but because he refused to remain the same. Anyone can stay committed when circumstances are favorable. It is easy to work hard when motivation is high, when support is strong, and when progress is visible. But true strength is not built in comfort. It is built in adversity. In the Courage Code of Joe Ranga, discipline during hard times was the foundation of real power. Hard times test character. They strip away convenience. They expose excuses. They challenge belief. And it is in those moments, when motivation disappears and results seem distant, that discipline becomes everything. Joe understood that emotions are temporary, but discipline is a decision. There were days when he felt exhausted, discouraged, or uncertain. Days when quitting would have felt easier than continuing. But instead of allowing his feelings to dictate his actions, he relied on commitment. Discipline means doing what needs to be done even when you don't feel like doing it. When setbacks appeared, he didn't pause his effort. When criticism came, he didn't abandon his focus. When progress slowed, he didn't lower his standards. He maintained his routine, protected his habits, and honored his commitments, especially when it was difficult. Hard times reveal whether your goals are desires or priorities. If they are only desires, they disappear under pressure. If they are priorities, discipline protects them. Joe treated challenges as training grounds. Financial struggles strengthened his resourcefulness. Emotional setbacks strengthened his resilience. Delays strengthened his patience. Every hardship became resistance that developed inner strength. Discipline during easy seasons is helpful. Discipline during hard seasons is transformational. When conditions are favorable, effort feels rewarding. But when results are delayed, discipline requires belief. Joe often worked without immediate recognition. He prepared without applause. He persisted without guarantees. That silent discipline created a deep-rooted confidence. Not because things were easy, but because he proved to himself that he could endure difficulty. Hard times also teach emotional control. Fear, frustration, and doubt become louder during adversity. Discipline helps manage those emotions. Instead of reacting impulsively, Joe responded intentionally. Instead of making decisions based on temporary feelings, he aligned actions with long-term vision. Consistency during struggle builds unshakable strength. Anyone can stand tall in calm weather. But those who remain steady in storms develop stability that cannot be easily broken. Joe also learned that discipline protects momentum. It prevents one bad day from turning into one bad week. It prevents one setback from turning into surrender. Even small disciplined actions during difficult periods keep progress alive. Real strength is not loud or dramatic. It is quiet persistence. It is continuing when no one sees the effort. It is maintaining standards when lowering them would be easier. It is choosing long-term growth over short-term comfort. Over time, the discipline Joe practiced during hard times shaped his identity. He became someone who does not stop when things get difficult. He became someone who honors commitments regardless of circumstances. He became someone whose strength was tested and proven under pressure. At the heart of the Courage Code of Joe Ranga lies a powerful principle. The promise you make to your dreams is sacred. It is easy to make a promise when inspiration is high. It is easy to feel committed when excitement is fresh. But the true test of character is whether you honor that promise when the journey becomes difficult. A dream is more than a wish. It is a vision of who you want to become. And when you commit to that vision, you are not just chasing success. You are shaping your identity. Joe understood that breaking a promise to others can damage relationships, but breaking a promise to yourself damages self-trust. Every time you say, "I will try," "I will improve," or "I will not quit," you are building an internal contract. If you repeatedly abandon that contract, your confidence weakens. Doubt grows. Discipline fades. But when you protect that promise, even in small ways, your self-belief strengthens. There were moments when Joe felt tired of trying. Moments when results were delayed. Moments when doubt whispered that maybe the dream was too big. But he reminded himself why he started. He remembered the hunger that fueled him. He remembered the vision that once kept him awake at night. Dreams demand loyalty. Loyalty does not mean the journey will be smooth. It means you refuse to surrender because of temporary discomfort. It means you adjust your strategy but you do not abandon your mission. It means you rest when necessary but you do not retreat permanently. Joe treated his dream like a responsibility. Not something to pursue casually but something to honor consistently. When distractions appeared, he refocused. When fear intensified, he strengthened his resolve. When progress slowed, he increased patience. Breaking your promise often begins with small compromises, skipping preparation, delaying action, lowering standards. Over time, those small compromises create distance between you and your goal. Joe guarded against that drift. He paid attention to his habits. He corrected himself quickly when he slipped. Keeping your promise builds internal strength. It creates alignment between your words and your actions. That alignment builds integrity, and integrity builds unstoppable confidence. There were sacrifices involved. Time, comfort, entertainment, and sometimes approval from others. Not everyone understood his dedication. Not everyone supported his ambition. But Joe understood something powerful. Dreams require commitment beyond convenience. He also recognized that setbacks do not mean promises are broken. Failure is not betrayal. Quitting is. Falling short is part of growth. Walking away is a choice. So even when he stumbled, he recommitted. Every day he chose to honor his dream even in small ways. Study a little more. Practice a little longer. Think a little bigger. Improve a little further. Over time, that unwavering loyalty transformed his mindset. He no longer questioned whether he would continue. Continuing became part of who he was. His dream was not just an external goal, it became an internal standard. When you refuse to break your promise to your dreams, you create a powerful message within yourself. My goals matter. My growth matters. My future matters. And that commitment reshapes the way you think, act, and endure challenges. Many people think courage is a single dramatic moment, a bold decision, a public stand, a fearless leap. But in the courage code of Joe Ranga, courage was never a one-time event. It was a daily discipline, a repeated decision, a quiet commitment made again and again. True courage is not built in a single breakthrough moment. It is built in ordinary days. Joe learned that bravery does not always look heroic. Sometimes it looks like waking up early when you feel tired. Sometimes it looks like trying again after failing yesterday. Sometimes it looks like continuing when nobody notices your effort. Courage is choosing growth over comfort, every day. There were mornings when doubt felt heavier than confidence. There were days when the path seemed unclear. There were moments when fear returned, even after previous victories. But Joe understood that courage is not permanent, it must be renewed. Each day presents new fears, new uncertainties, new pressures. And each day requires a new decision. Will I move forward or will I retreat? Joe chose forward. He realized that waiting to feel brave was a trap. Courage rarely arrives before action. It grows through action. The first step often feels uncertain. The second feels slightly stronger. The third builds momentum. Over time, small acts of bravery compound into powerful confidence. Daily courage also means confronting internal battles, negative thoughts, self-doubt, procrastination. These silent struggles can be more challenging than external obstacles. Joe practiced courage not only in public situations but in private moments when no one was watching. He challenged his excuses. He questioned his fears. He confronted his limiting beliefs. That internal courage shaped his external strength. Consistency in courage builds identity. When you repeatedly choose bravery, you begin to see yourself as someone who does not back down. That self-image becomes powerful. It influences decisions, habits, and responses to difficulty. Joe understood that big achievements are the result of small courageous acts repeated over time. Sending the message, making the call, taking the risk, speaking the truth, learning the skill, trying again. None of these actions alone define greatness. But together, over months and years, they create transformation. Courage also means accepting vulnerability daily. Being willing to be imperfect. Being open to learning. Being humble enough to grow. It requires emotional honesty, admitting when you are afraid, yet refusing to let fear control you. Some days courage feels strong and visible. Other days it feels quiet and fragile. But what matters is not how loud it feels, it is whether you choose it. Joe built his success not on a single bold leap, but on repeated, disciplined bravery. He understood that greatness is not born in one fearless moment. It is built through thousands of small, consistent choices to continue. Every day offered him a decision. And every day he recommitted to courage, not because it was easy but because it was necessary. The journey of Joe Ranga teaches us that courage, resilience, and success are not born from luck or fleeting inspiration. They are cultivated through consistent choices, disciplined effort, and unwavering principles. Each of the 20 key points of his courage code, from self-belief and adaptability to patience, gratitude, and integrity, forms a blueprint for living a life of purpose, strength, and fulfillment. Joe's story reminds us that greatness is not measured solely by achievements, recognition, or wealth. It is measured by the quality of our character, the depth of our persistence, and the courage to continue even when the path is uncertain. It is about showing up every day, facing fear, learning from failure, and honoring the promises we make to our dreams. By embracing these principles, we too can transform challenges into opportunities, setbacks into lessons, and ambition into meaningful accomplishment. The Courage Code is not just Joe Ranga's story, it is a guide for anyone determined to live boldly, rise above adversity, and leave a legacy that inspires others long after their journey continues. Ultimately, the legacy of Joe Ranga is clear. Courage is a choice, strength is forged through struggle, and a life lived with integrity, perseverance, and purpose is a life worth celebrating. His code invites us all to rise, act, and persevere, not just for ourselves but for the impact we leave in the world.